The pictures from this past winter are going to be hard to erase. The epic snowfall in parts of this year, especially the southern Sierra, where we saw historic snow water equivalent, how much water was in that snowpack. But are we heading into a California snow drought? I want to start off by unpacking this all with the definitions of a snow drought. First of all, dry snow. That just basically means we have below normal cold season precipitation, just a lack of snow. And we've seen that in the past couple of years here in California. Warm snow is going to be precipitation falling as rain rather than snow. That would be a huge problem, especially for California. Now, we've seen this kind of pivoting from those wild swings from snow drought to epic snowfall in the Sierra. This is just Lake Tahoe since 1979, taking it through 2023 this year. And you can see there's a couple of years where we have above normal precipitation, but most notably is a lot of these red bars here where we go through those snow drought periods. And the reason why this is so critical for California is that snowpack is our free savings account for water during the dry season. And we really rely on this year to year. This is a graphic that was put out in 2011 by Mike Dettinger, I should say. And you can see that we have a lot of these green, blue, and even black dots. Well, that represents the year-to-year variability. And you see it nowhere else except California, basically. A little bit in through Arizona, but most notably, it is in California. So managing our water basically on scarcity is becoming more and more challenging. And now a new UC San Diego Scripps Institution of Oceanography study has some key points. And this is if we make no changes whatsoever to our climate adaptation. The snow line, it found, is going to be rising about 1,600 feet by the end of the century. That's if no climate action is taken. Ski resorts, well, this could affect low elevation resorts with about 70% of the natural snowpack going away. So strategies need to be taken into account, and resorts need to be moving towards that sustainability as well as a state water management shift. We were able to catch up with Mike Reitzel from Ski California, just talking about what this means for some of those ski resorts.
This is really a time when we have to do things. They're really saying with this study that, look, you can avoid what ultimately would be a pretty disastrous situation if you make changes.
What Mike was basically talking about is those disastrous consequences if no climate action is taken. So we take a look at South Lake Tahoe and some of the climate shift that we could potentially see. These are numbers that were taken from Climate Toolbox, which is a great tool to have. If you want to check it out online, you can put in location and then put in different types of scenarios that could happen based on different climate modeling. So I picked a warm and wet and a hot and wet scenario and what the differences would mean for a place like South Lake Tahoe. Currently, the winter mean temperature is 30.34 degrees. Now, if we go for the most catastrophic, it would be 37 degrees. Winter precipitation goes up. But again, we talked about the two different types of snow drought. The warm and wet one would mean that we just get a whole lot more rain at lower elevations, and the snow, not so much. Now, the coldest winter day also will have impacts. Instead of being below zero, we go to the coldest winter day, potentially not even below 3 degrees. And hot and wet scenario, we're talking about 10 degrees or so. Again, that has big impacts on how much rain versus snow falls at the lower elevations. The reason why the precipitation tends to go up is because warmer air can hold more moisture. So we can get some big rainfall. We can also get some big snowfall, like what we saw this year, with some historic numbers, especially for the southern Sierra. So we still have a lot of snowpack in the Sierra, which has been a bit challenging for water managers because we're having to deal with flooding. And in the background of all of this, we're still dealing with that shifting climate that we've been preparing for less snow in the Sierra, where year to year, we're basically seeing less snow, but we'll be kind of seeing every other year with one of those big snowpacks coming in. For California, the snowpack basically is our free savings account for water because we have to deal with a tremendous amount of scarcity. We don't get any rain or snow in the summer. If we do, it's kind of that monsoonal flow, but those aren't filling our reservoirs, the biggest of which are in Northern California. All of this valley area, especially once you head into the San Joaquin Valley, it is terribly dry. And it relies a lot on those upstream Northern California reservoirs, the surface water, the delta, and a huge conveyance system, which we're going to show you. But that snowpack fills the reservoirs, it's released, and then it can be stored in our groundwater as well. The snow actually supplies a third of our state water needs, helping to fill those reservoirs. Now, we also get some other water sources, being the groundwater, imports, recycled water is one. Desalination has been getting a lot of traction with some headlines, but ultimately, recently government was saying, state government saying that's not going to be a long-term solution for it. It's just not as cost effective as what we have already built in. Look at this. All right, so this is out at the Burney Falls, and it's up towards the northern part of California. This is how much water is coming down off the hill. This is what I'm talking about, filling the reservoirs right now. That's a current picture, and it's a lot of water that we have to prepare for, but we also have to manage. So I just wanted to kind of show you building a water year for California. This is how we basically play this out. October to November, that's usually when the fall rain starts. And then December, January, February is about 50% of our annual precipitation. Think about that. Just digest that for a moment. In 3 months, we get 50% of all the rain and snow that we typically see. And our peak snowpack hits just after March. After that, we begin the peak snow melt. And this is going to be where the water has its highest demand in a time frame when we don't typically get anything in the way of rain or snow. Plus, on top of that, we get the big heat in August and September with temperatures exceeding 100s for weeks at a time. And then the water year will end at the end of September. So I just wanted to lay out how much water managers have to deal with. Now, this year was an anomaly. We don't normally see years like this where we have multiple atmospheric rivers, and kind of kicking it all off was that New Year's storm with the exceptional atmospheric river. You might have been hearing more and more about atmospheric rivers. This is just an animation from the Center for Western Weather and Water Extremes. Just beautiful depiction of what an atmospheric river is, pulling in a tremendous amount of water vapor from the Pacific. And when it lands in California, kind of gets squeezed out and delivers what we need for our winter precipitation. It's just when we get too much, it results in flooding. But the lack of those atmospheric rivers will mean we head into drought. So studying these atmospheric rivers can also have beneficial effects. Lake Mendocino's storage was studied a couple of years ago, and by predicting those atmospheric rivers, kind of having the keys to forecasting those, knowing how much water to keep in and how much to let out so that we prepare for the potential for flooding, using those improved forecasts allowed water managers to keep an additional 20% of storage at Lake Mendocino. That's a program called Forecast Informed Reservoir Operations. You're going to be hearing a lot more about that out of California. This is another picture of one of our biggest reservoirs, that's Shasta, and you can see how full everything is. Again, these pictures are coming in because of the epic snowfall that we saw. So the above ground water storage is a huge part of California's water storage. But when we talk about the main groundwater basins, it can store 10 times, even more than that, about up to 1 million acre feet of storage compared to about 50 million acre feet of storage in our surface water for our reservoirs. By the way, we have about 1,500 reservoirs. A lot of them are small, but we focus on the bigger ones. And I wanted to just show you this map right here because it really does show the incredible complexity to our conveyance system in California. In the northern part of the state, we have that biggest reservoir, Shasta. And then we get to Oroville. That's also part of the State Water Project. Shasta is going to be the federal water project, so we have to work in conjunction with not only state entities, but federal agencies, and deliver that water throughout the central part of the state. So it heads through the Sacramento region, and then this is where it gets really interesting because we have the California Aqueduct and then many canals that will feed people that just don't otherwise have access to a whole lot of water. with the water necessary to grow the world's foods. It's kind of the fruit basket of the world. That's all here through the Central Valley. And that's why this water conveyance system is so critical for us to maintain the life that we live in California. This year, like I said, an anomaly. It was a La Nina year, which typically favors a much wetter scenario through the northern part of the state and the Pacific Northwest, and a drier for the southern part of the state. But we had a little bit better precipitation going on throughout the entire state. So we really saw some big numbers coming in here. Outside of Palm Springs was a little bit below average, but all in all, some decent numbers. I picked out a couple of locations here because I just wanted to show you what this year has delivered in terms of our snow water equivalent, how much water we're actually able to pull out of the Sierra. Pilot Peak in the Northern Sierra, we're at 534% of average. In the Central Sierra, Virginia Lakes, over 600. And then we get into the Southern Sierra, and that's where we have the big numbers. Cottonwood Lakes, 928% of average right now. And that is feeding our big reservoirs. You can see we're at about 77 to almost 100% full, a huge turnaround from last year. And when you look at the historical comparison, we're at about 95 to almost 125% of average. It'd be nice to keep things going. Again, water managers are really focused on how we can continue to maintain not only our surface water, our groundwater, our imports, our recycling, to make sure that we continue to feed California with the water we need.